Hi, everybody, and welcome to the BIDE podcast, the podcast from BIDE. Today, in our chapter number 28, we are talking with Dara Milovanovic. Dara is a good friend of ours. We collaborate since a long time ago, and she's the head of the Department of Music and Dance at the University of Nicosia. Besides many other things that we'll be sharing after this introduction. So thank you so much, Dara, to be with us, and it's a pleasure to have you in the podcast of BIDE.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
Well, we always start with asking to our guest about, the early days, and we always say in Spanish, el bicho que te picó, that in English be translated like what bug bites you, to choose this path of being part of the dance community. So can be great to the people that maybe don't know your history to know a bit of why and what happens to this young Dara that decides to join the dance community and the dance itself as a path.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, it might sound a little bit cheesy, but I don't know that I had chosen it. I don't know how this happened. My parents liked dancing at home and stuff, but I wasn't anywhere near it. I come from a very working class family, and I grew up in what was Yugoslavia, no longer exists, and I just always danced around. But my parents didn't. I kept asking to go to ballet class, but they kept saying no because my sister was a pre-professional athlete in ice skating, and they just couldn't cope with another kid, having to take another kid somewhere. So when I was about 8, I heard of a friend. We lived in Russia at this time, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, I'm going to ballet classes," and I said, "Can I come with you?" So I went with her and her grandmother and signed myself up for ballet classes. So I started with ballet, and what would be now probably considered a little bit late because kids start dance classes so early, not that I don't necessarily agree with that. So I started with these, very traditional, classical, strict ballet classes, and I enjoyed it very much so. However, there weren't other dance classes that you can take. I think in the sort of 80s in communist countries, you kind of had two choices. It was ballet or folklore or folkloric dances. And I really enjoyed ballet. And then, so that's how it started. And I was kind of obsessed and kept dancing. I loved musicals and I would learn all of them. My sister is not a dancer, but she liked dancing. So we would learn all the routines from the musicals. And that's how the love for the musical started, which became my research in the long run. And then at some point I started with, modern or jazz classes or whatever they were. And that is what I loved. And I still have to say, it's what I really love. I love teaching it. I love doing it. I think it's a lot of fun. So I moved to Cyprus when I was 14. And right before I moved to Cyprus, I got accepted into the professional ballet school in Belgrade. So when we moved here, I was very, very upset that we moved because I thought my dance career would be over. As you think as a young teen. And then I was very lucky to find a wonderful teacher here, and I trained in jazz and ballet with her. And she had decided that the place for me to study was going to be either London Contemporary Dance School or Lane Theatre Arts, that's what it's called, which is also in England. And I got accepted to both with a VCR tape, which was terrible. And every now and then when we want to laugh, my husband and we watch it. And
you still have this VCR tape?
Yes, I still have a VCR tape and a VCR player. So I got accepted into both. And then Lane Theatre Arts had, on their application, had a height and weight thing. So I decided that I didn't want this. I didn't want the pressure of being weighed every week because the dance schools were still doing it back then. So this was in the 90s. So I went to London Contemporary and got thrown into contemporary dance, which was very strange and foreign to me, never having done it. So I think this was quite common when you came from, non-Western countries that there were no contemporary dances in Cyprus. And that was quite a difficult year. We were doing Graham, which I now love, but then didn't. It was very, very tough. And I left after a year, not in the best psychological state. I just really wasn't happy, just wasn't really a right school for me. And I ended up moving to the States. I enrolled at the University of the Arts, which now is a very popular university. They produce a lot of people who go to study taking dance. So they've become very, very popular. It's also very expensive now. It's about $45,000 a year, which is crazy. It was like 12 when I was going there. But I wasn't really, really happy. I was really missing the academic stimulation. I was a very good student. And so I decided that I would train on my own sort of accord. So I transferred to a university in Philadelphia, which is called Drexel University. And I had a wonderful time. I got a degree in history and politics and a minor in dance. There was a wonderful woman who ran this minor, and she ran the Drexel Dance Ensemble, and we got to perform a lot. So we performed twice a year, and it was a beautiful group of people, many of whom I'm still friends, and many of whom went on to have dance careers. So it was really interesting. So there's a number of us out in the world who don't have our first degrees in dance, but we were able to train, and Philadelphia is quite a small place. So she brought in a lot of guest artists. So I ended up dancing with a small company in Philadelphia with a woman. It was ran by a woman called Gwendolyn BIDE. And she had trained with Mary Anthony, who was one of the pioneers of modern dance in the US, sort of a contemporary of Martha Graham. So I was very, very lucky to have all these experiences. And then I'd go to local sort of open classes, and I found classes that I really loved, and I kept up with my jazz training. So then came a time I graduated. I said to my parents, what shall I do? And they said, we have no idea, as they always did. And I decided that I was going to apply to different master's programs. And I decided they were going to decide for me. This was my idea. So I applied for master's in history, in post-Soviet studies, in cultural anthropology, dance studies. There was another one, I don't remember. And then out of the 8 programs that I applied for, only 1 rejected me. So that made my decision much more difficult. And I was trying to figure out whether to move back to Europe or to stay in the US. I really enjoyed the American educational system, and I liked living in the US. It was I felt really at home. I liked a lot of the ease of it. I know that the US is very different now, I think, than when I was there. And I have to say that I never had those bad experiences when I was there. I felt very, very at home. I didn't feel like a foreigner. It was a really great experience. So then somebody said, oh, have you heard of, there's a brand new master's program at Florida State University in Tallahassee. And I had to look up where Tallahassee was. And I decided to apply for it. And because it was new, I got funding. So I got a full scholarship to go there. And I decided to go there, which was a great decision, even though Tallahassee is not a very exciting place. But the program was fantastic. It was just everything I wanted. I really loved, it kind of gave me this insight into both dance and history. Because FSU has a very good dance department, I was able to take dance classes which were on very high level. So I trained while I was there. I kept taking class. I managed to perform. And then I got this fantastic education that was completely decolonized 20 years ago. So I find this conversation about decolonization of dance education really quite interesting, because the people that I had teaching me, like Sally Summer, who I'm still very good friends with, and Trisha Young and John Propiner, they were doing this a long, long time ago. Our dance history wasn't just on contemporary and ballet dance. It was very inclusive. It wasn't Eurocentric. So this is where my research started, and I said, oh, I really want to do something on Bob Fosse, because who I loved. And first they said, oh, so cheesy. Come on, what are you going to do with it? And then I convinced them, and I said, no, what I want to do is I would really want to study sort of the images of femininity in his work. So that's what I did. And I finished in 2003, and I was very, very exhausted after having studied for about 7 years. And I decided to move back to Cyprus. I had gone into a PhD program at University of Surrey, but I deferred it. And I said to my parents, I need some time off. I want to dance. I want to write for newspapers. I want to sort of have these experiences. And of course, I started a relationship with my now husband, and he had moved back from England to Cyprus. So we decided to move back to Cyprus and sort of give our lives a chance. So I moved back to Cyprus. Cyprus is a small place, but now it has a really thriving contemporary dance scene, which was just starting out. So the first Cyprus dance platform took place in 2001. And this is something that happens every year. Now we're on our 21st, second, I don't know where we are. And I came back sort of at the right time and started doing a lot of pickup work. So most of the work in Cyprus is still, we don't have a company that has annual funding. So it's project-based work. And I did that for a while. I was also teaching dance at, local dance schools. I started writing for 2 papers. One was the Cyprus Mail. The other one was Time Out Cyprus, which I don't know if it still exists. And it was great. It was, I was young. I was full of beans. I was doing all these different things. Then somebody had started a dance program at University of Nicosia, and I approached them and said I would love to teach. And I got very, very lucky and got a full-time position in 2008. So I've been at University of Nicosia as a dance lecturer since 2008. And then, I had a brand new baby. I had a 6-month-old baby and a new job. So the first year was quite tough, but it was good and great learning experience. And I was teaching dance history. I was teaching contemporary, technique, and jazz. And the program has been sort of growing, shrinking, depending on what kind of economic crisis that we have. So in 2013, I became the program coordinator because the person who was the program coordinator left. So I have been running the dance program now for, 9 years. And, administrative positions at universities are good because you get to sort of shape what you need to do. You sort of get to reflect on what the students need. I still get to teach, which I like. I really like teaching. And then I was advised by the university that it would be good to get a PhD. So I started a PhD in 2010, and it took me 8 years to complete it. I was doing it part-time. But of course, I was doing it part-time while having a full-time job, raising a kid, and a family. We have a family, and still trying to dance. So I still kept up the performing career up until 2017. That's the last time that I performed. And then I had to sort of make a decision that I had to finish my PhD and had to say, just stop performing because it just takes up too much time. And then kind of the two things kind of collided that I started getting a little bit older. I didn't have time to train. So now my body is kind of, okay, we're done. So so I've been sort of climbing the ranks. I'm now the assistant professor, and I just applied for my promotion, so I'm waiting for results of that. And, sort of living the life of the academic. I became the head of the department in 2020, which of course is tricky. So now I oversee the dance program and the music program. And of course, we've had the COVID crisis. So basically, it's been crisis management for about 2 years. And now we're starting to come out and sort of try to have visions for what we want the department to do, what kind of contribution we want to have on the island and even in the area, what kind of research I want to be doing. So I'm kind of now occupying 2 things. One is that of the administrative position that I have, and the other is the academic. So I still teach, and then I also do quite a bit of research. So I've had quite a few publications in the last few years, which is great, but also finding the time to do that is obviously very, very difficult. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So I sort of consider myself to be a contemporary dancer and a jazz dancer. I had a lot more experience performing contemporary, but having said that, I really, really love dance. So I will watch just about anything. And I love ballet, and I love social dance, and I love club dancing. And I'm constantly fascinating by it. Like, so the students, when I teach, they kind of get a bit like, okay, why is she excited about everything? But I do, because I think that dance is so important in society and what it reflects about society. And what I'm trying to give to our students is exactly this sense of pride in this art form, that it's not just a bunch of steps. And even if it is just a bunch of steps, they mean something to somebody. So that's kind of where I am. Of course, I'm married to a dancer, which is a beautiful experience. It's an interesting experience. It's an interesting experience of having two aging dancers in a household. And we are planning to do a research project as to why male dancers marry female dancers. Because we know so many who are or go for artists. So yeah, it's a bit of a running joke in the family. But yeah, that's kind of my story. And yeah, I've been in Cyprus for a long time now. And yeah, that's it, I think.
Wow, it's amazing. And you know what kind of a driving force moved you to do all the things that you did, and still, as you said, no, still learning and still be motivated and at the same time enthusiastic, you know, being part of this community and this art form. I will just because I have a few questions about your past, but because you know you came from Yugoslavia, you jumped to Russia, from Russia to America, and then come back to Cyprus. So really 4 different places and let's say with a lot of contrast with each other, you know. So so my first question is about what things you take from each of these places, you know, besides of course your formation, your studies, and all the titles that you was you know, forming experience classes and etc. So what, because you have a super deep because we know each other, you have a sort of a super deep political commitment also with reflecting and thinking about what is dance nowadays, what is dance in this modern world that we are now living with. So what piece of Dara's, you know, was collecting in from the early days till nowadays, you know, being in 4 so different places, like I said before, you know.
Yeah, so I kind of, I think both my sister and I, we talk about this a lot, because I don't think we realized that moving country to country was not something everybody did. So just a quick recap. So born in Yugoslavia, I moved to Soviet Russia when I was 4. Then we moved back to what was then Serbia when I was 9. Then we moved to Cyprus when I was 14. So I went to Soviet school, then Serbian school, then a British school in Cyprus. Then I spent a year in England when I was 18. Then I moved to the States, and then I've moved back to Cyprus. So technically, on paper, I am Serbian. And when I argue with my husband, he tells me I'm Serbian because of my arguing techniques. But you know, there is this interesting cultural phenomenon that I am, in a sense, and I think I'm just starting to try to understand it now. So my husband is, I think this is also important, my husband is half English, half Cypriot, and most of my friends in Cyprus are mixed. So there is this subculture in Cyprus of mixed people, or people who have lived here for a very long time. Of course, I also speak 4 languages, which I also think it's perfectly normal, you know, because both my sister and I do. So I think what it does, and I have one parent who loves to travel. So, and they took us everywhere with them. This was my dad's doing. So for example, and I know this makes me sound super privileged, the first time I went to Japan, I was 5. And my mom just got angry with my dad and got tickets for us and went to Japan with 2 kids. And then we went again. They really, from Serbia, you can travel everywhere by car. So that's what we did. But we really have traveled a lot. And then this is something I really, really like. And I think that is one of the things that are key to somebody's education. So being sort of exposed to different cultures. And I'm very, very adaptable. So if your accent is like this, I will speak to you like that. And your accent like that, I will speak to you like that. And I will even change my body language, because I have been immersed in so many cultures. My parents were also very good about, okay, we move here. These are the friends that we make. So we didn't necessarily look for Serbian culture everywhere. Of course, we did have Serbian friends in places, or rather, when we lived in Russia, we had Yugoslavian friends. So we have friends in Slovenia and in Croatia and in Skopje. And that made us very non-judgmental and non-nationalistic. So I am very, very concerned about nationalism that's happening everywhere in the world. As I was really hoping that at this point we would be beyond it with people like myself, or now my child who has all these and doesn't identify with anything. I think there is the other thing that's difficult, which is a sense of belonging. So I don't feel like I belong anywhere. Except for in my household with my husband and my child and my cats. And we sort of operate in this vacuum of a culture. And the one thing and it's really interesting because, of course, there are cultural differences as to the way we grew up, from the way we hold the fork to, I don't know, silly things. And yet, because we both feel like he's cross-culture and I'm third culture, that we're really united in that sort of non-belonging, but also in dance. I think that's really, really key for us. So, I had a dance party with my kid at 11:30 on a Monday night, and we just danced around the house. It's a really, really big part of our household, and it's really important to us. So and yes, the contrast, so that I'm keenly aware that, what we experienced in communism and what was completely normal to us is very, very foreign, and people are very scared of it. And I, some things were good, some things were not good. Of course, I was a child, so I didn't experience so much of the oppression. The discipline that was inflicted onto us in communism is something that we very much carry. I can see it in Russians of my age group, in my sister, in Serbians of my age group. There is a different understanding of discipline. And yet there is also this very revolutionary, like we can change the world type thing, because we did witness the change. I'm not a big fan of capitalism, I have to say. I think it's very problematic, especially for the arts. I think we're in a very, very difficult position. I find this, working in a private university, that I have to recruit students to cover my salary. I'm very aware of that. I am, and that makes me somehow a little bit uncomfortable. But then on the other hand, I see the change that we're able to make in students, and some of it is very, very beautiful. So yeah, I didn't realize that my life was different until we went to the States a few years ago for a guest artist gig, and I met people who'd never been outside their town of 1,200 people, and they looked at me like they were very, very sweet, but I was like an alien to them. And, this person who's like lived more lives, by a certain age than people live in their whole lifetimes. But my sister and I keep mentioning her because we're so united in our experience, because the only thing that went everywhere with me was my sister. And, the parents went, but whatever, their parents. And, those parents were different than the parents that we are now. We sort of talk about our adaptability. We were thrown into schools without speaking the language. We made friends very quickly. We're very good at making friends, at sort of talking to anyone. I have this thing, I'm completely not afraid of making mistakes in a language. I would rather try and speak it, so I make lots of mistakes, for example, in Greek, but I just speak it. And yeah, so but all these influences are there. I can see them now in me. Like I was saying to Alex, when the the vaccine came out with COVID, I was like, oh, we just need a bit of communism. Just get into schools, vaccinate everyone, and be done. And he'll say, oh, I can't believe you said that. But there are things that they're coming up that sort of I can see how we need a different system. We don't need communism, and we don't need neoliberal capitalism, but we need a more humane system. And I think that is coming out of the fact that I have lived all these systems, in a sort of very embodied way, rather than reading about it or, thinking about it, that we were really immersed in these systems. And there are these very strong contrasts in me, even with the way that I eat food. I will, I really don't make any type of cuisine. I will kind of eat everything. I'm not religious. That's because of the communist thing. We weren't allowed. My parents weren't religious. And I think that also really affects the way that I see the world, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. So there are many, many contrasts and many, many experiences. And I think they also really feed into the way that I look at dance. I was just working on a research project about, what is the experience of watching American dance when you are from another country, which is very different, I think. So, I grew up obsessively watching Grease and The Sound of Music, and I was just watched these like crazy. I desperately wanted to be in an American school, then Beverly Hills 90210. I mean, just all these experiences that when you look at them from a perspective of non-American, I think we can offer something that is a very different view than what an American scholar does, because I've realized that there are things that are missing from an American point of view simply because they haven't been exposed to it, and that's okay. So we need to complement each other, but we need to allow for these other voices to shine. And of course that is happening, but it's not happening enough. Western dance is still very much dominating who gets funded, who goes on TV, who is seen. Of course, now we have the beauty of TikTok where everybody can post. TikTok can be problematic, but it's opened access to a lot of people, which is kind of cool. Of course, the algorithms get messed up, but you can look for queer, marginalized people creating content, creating art, even if it's teeny tiny. So I think that's a really interesting phenomenon. And I think what COVID, as terrible as it been for live arts, I think it's been really wonderful for allowing people to unite across the globe. So, we were able to take classes. So I've taken classes from the Graham Company, from Steps on Broadway, which of course were never available before. Is it ideal to take a class in your living room? No, of course not, but at least you can take it. So I think that's one of the things that's opened up with COVID, that there is more access to things because there's so much more virtual presence. I know we're all tired of the virtual presence, but it does give possibility to somebody in, I don't know, somewhere that is not in New York, it's not in London, that's not in Paris, that's not in Barcelona, beautiful big city, that has lots of dance or whatever. So yeah, I think it's very hard for me to articulate, and I have been thinking about this a lot, about, what have all these experiences done for me and how they have affected me. And I don't know that I have an answer yet. And because obviously we're changing all the time as people, it's really interesting. As a parent, because we didn't inflict anything like, people, we are this, or we are Serbians, or we're Cypriots, and so when our kid gets asked, because people are confused at school where she's from, she has a Cypriot name, but she speaks English with an English accent. So they're confused, and they'll say, where are you from? And she'll say, my mom is Serbian and my dad is half English and half Cypriot. And they say, but where are you from? And she said, well, I'm from here. I'm from Limassol. But she has a difficult time identifying as one or the other, because it's not something we have enforced, because we feel like we exist in this sort of non-grounded culture in a sense. But then obviously you know us, and that we're extremely grounded people. and we're contemporary dancers, so we're definitely grounded. So yeah, it's an interesting process of figuring out one's culture when you're not sure about it.
Yeah, and it's funny because if I can say something personal, she also played. She also played drums, So it's an interesting instrument, considering what type of motion came from for her parents, with all this traveling around and all this experience that you kindly are sharing with us. So drums are a specific and a different instrument comparing to the melodic one, the guitar, the piano, whatever, So I mean, hearing drums is something that also maybe talk a bit about how she can be, part of whatever she want to be, So,
yeah, I think that's one of the things that we wanted to instill in her, because obviously, I think, Alex's choice to become a male dancer it's very courageous when he did it. Obviously, now things are a lot better. And don't forget, we live in a small society. He was only the second man to leave Cyprus and go study dance. So we really wanted to give her the freedom to be herself. So we have exposed her to a lot of things. She also does ballet, and she does contemporary classes, and she sings, and she writes, and she draws, and obviously she's artistic. She's growing up in an artistic household, and that's the way she's inclined. She's also very, very clever. But we did want to expose her to all these different things so that she could choose. And obviously we are not people who follow the mainstream. I think anybody who chooses to dance knows what they're getting into. This is not an easy career. It's not, you know what you're going into. You know that you have power to sort of change yourself, if not others. And so, yeah, this is something that we really wanted to give her as parents, and sort of seeing her for the strength and the talent and the sensitivities that she has. So, yeah, we hope we're doing a good job. But, she has two parents who are artists and who are also academics. So it's a very different experience to us growing up. To her, I sometimes look at her and I think, oh my God, I'm almost jealous. It's so funny. I mean, my parents were wonderful parents, and Alex's parents are wonderful parents, but they so have no idea what we do. It's so funny to me sometimes. Like, my mom just has no clue what I do. And it's okay, because why would she? But we grew up in sort of working class families. And so for us, it was going against the grain to become artists. For her, it's just following family tradition. So it's a very, very interesting experience to observe, to see that she doesn't have to fight against anyone to become an artist. It's actually, for her, we would probably be very surprised if she wanted to be an accountant. We would be like, what are you doing? Of course, we would support her, and we would support her in anything that she wants to do, but it would be an odd choice for her. Whereas for us, becoming dancers was an odd choice for our parents. They were very supportive. I have to say, we were both very, very lucky that we had supportive parents that didn't stand in the way. They also didn't push, which I sometimes complained to my mother and my late father. I used to complain to him, why didn't you push me? Why didn't you push me? I could have done this and I could have done that. And he'll said, you pushed yourself, and we just gave you the freedom to do that. So whereas Emily has a lot of input, from traveling, from going to performances, to watching stuff at home, being surrounded by art and dance books, by having us dance in the house, being a part of the creative process. She's been to lots of rehearsals. She knows what a rehearsal looks like. So she will not be surprised if she goes to one day. She knows what happens behind the creative process. She knows that, my husband's a choreographer, so he listens to music and counts it and dances and tries to figure out and writes notes. And so she knows that the creative process isn't in the moment, that there's a lot of thought behind it. There's a lot of commitment and devotion to it. And that I'm very proud of, because she respects this art form, which demands respect. And that's one thing I really wanted to give her. I wasn't interested, and I'm, because we've heard, are you going to make her a dancer? And you can't make anybody a dancer unless they they want to make themselves a dancer, but this was never the goal. It's a hard profession. Of course, she dances and she loves it and she's talented. But the goal was to just give her the respect for what we do. And I think she really appreciates that. She has parents who like their jobs. I think this is very, very important. Do we complain? Sure. Do we complain about everything hurting? Sure. But, at the end of the day, we really enjoy doing what we're doing. And I love teaching. I love doing research. I love watching dance. We went to see the West Side Story, the new one. I mean, we went on the day that it opened. We had been sitting, and the three of us went, and we were clapping in the cinema. It was so good. But, I love that she sees us be excited, or she sees me. I shouldn't speak on Alex's behalf, but she really sees me be passionate about the thing that I do. And I really love it. I love dance. And, I could have done other things, but I'm really glad that I didn't, because I just think that dance is such a complete experience. And for somebody like me who likes to move and has a busy brain, it is the ultimate way in which everything falls into place, where I have this corporeal experience and then my brain is getting to experience that through the physical, which is very, very important for me. So, and that's what I love about studying about dance, is that it's just the most complex art form. It is so human. It is so dependent on every single person that does it. I find dancers to be very fascinating, and I love that everybody's individuality comes. So no matter how you're trained, there's training, and then there's individuality of both the anatomy and also the person, and the way they're choosing to interpret something, and the way that, they're making choices instantly in the way that they're moving. So I find this really, really fascinating. But I also love looking back, like when the war in Ukraine started, which is just awful. But, I was thinking about the green table, Kurt Yossi's green table. I was thinking, oh my God, this dance that was made in 1936, I think it was made, is still so relevant.
Absolutely.
And that everybody will understand it. And then, Hoffe Schechter's Political Mother references that dance. And I love watching all these connections and watching how different cultures can interpret these things. So yeah, I just keep finding it fascinating and exciting, which is great, because if you're doing a job at the end of the day, and I'm very lucky to be able to do this and to have a salary, I am completely aware of how lucky I am and privileged I am to do that. But also then I feel like I have to give it my all, because I happen to be in this privileged position. And there's loads of people I know, loads of friends that I have who have PhDs in dance and are jobless. And that is just a crime, because the arts and the education is in such a difficult place. And I'm curious to see where it goes in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, well, you work it out also. It's not just lucky. I mean, you have lucky, but you study a lot. You put yourself really into that, and also you are super. You talk about the discipline, and the concept of discipline is something that have many definitions, but somehow some people attach this definition to the military type of angle. But it's more about what we call in Spanish el deseo, that is not the wishes. It's more the driving force, where you are doing the things also when you don't want to, or you don't have the energy to do it. You just drop yourself into the studio and cross the door, and when you are in, this discipline arrives. So it's something that is a training process from my experience also. And you name a lot of things, and it's interesting because also you interact with a lot of young students and dancers, and for many years nowadays. And also, we have our collaboration with BIDE. I would like to ask you something about it also later. But what do you think that these young dancers or young artists are now? not now that we are in the third year of the COVID, but how change, this perspective, because you have I don't know how many, but maybe more than 3 or 4 generations in this Cyprus university where you can, see where they go, of course, out of the island, a lot of go to Greece or to Germany or whatever, but it's not about where they go, it's what they get and what type of wishes you having from them,
Yeah. So we've had 80 graduates in the 15 years that we've been doing, that I've been teaching there, or the program has been running. And we actually this year looked at what everybody's doing, and a lot of our students go into teaching, and a lot of them do everything. So we are constantly looking at, as a department, what do our students actually need? What does it mean to be a dance artist now? And what do they need for this particular culture? So particularly in Cyprus, because most of them stay here. Some go out and then they come back. But they, this is a family-oriented culture, and they like to be close to their families. And also they can't afford to leave. This is the other thing. It's, I think it's so hard for this generation of this young generation. I'm watching them, and I love being allowed to watch them. And I love the way that they open up. Most of them are young women. We do have some men, but most of them are young women. And I continue to have a relationship with some of them even after they graduate, and they become friendly and friends. And I think that's something that I learned from my mentors in the US, that you can be friendly. You don't have to have this, okay, you need to have the discipline, but actually the students will know when and where. So when you're in a classroom, then, they will have respect, and then we can go outside and we can talk about anything and everything, and that's okay. And they will learn that, okay, that's okay. So the dance scene has changed so much since when I went to study. The idea was, when I went to study dance, you learn how to dance. Hopefully you were good enough and you made it into a company. And now the companies don't exist. Most of the work is pick up, except for the big ballet companies. In the US, there's the Graham Company, which again, they get paid 9 months a year. They don't get paid year round. There's Ailey. There's Hubbard. There's so few companies that you can actually go and get a job as a dancer. So here, most of the work is project-based, as I said earlier. So basically, we try to get them really networking while they're still students, so they get to know people. We give them a lot of improvisation skills, because working as a dancer in the contemporary field now, that's key. It's no matter how good your technique is, unless you're able to improvise, you're never going to work. Working on sort of their individuality, helping them find what they want to do and how they want to contribute to the dance field. Also teaching them how to write. We find it that, young dancers come back from these great conservatories, and here you have to keep applying for grants. And unless you can write 2 sentences, you can't apply for grants. And they really don't come equipped with this. So we try to equip our students with this, with the ability to write about an idea. I have an idea. How can I articulate it so that somebody will give me money so I can make this idea? We work on research, both practical and scholarly research, for those that choose to move on to master's degrees, which a few of them have and do, and they usually do it abroad. But it's a weird thing to watch also as humans, how different their experience is to what ours was when we were, teens and in our early 20s, with the phones and the social media, the way that they curate their lives on social media as opposed to what they're like in person. And I will call them on it. Like, why is your Instagram just full of selfies in a bikini when I've never seen you in a bikini? When, don't you have a cactus that you like that you want to put on your Instagram? A cat, a dog, a boyfriend or something? So I question them a lot. I'm trying to push them and I do this young dancers also here in Cyprus. Maybe they didn't study with us. They kind of do turn to us for mentorship. And I've mentored people for festivals in Cyprus. And I really am trying to get them to question, why am I making this choice? Is it my choice because they're made to feel like they're in control, but actually that all these systems create these pressures on us and we are acting on behalf or in spite of those. So that is, I think, my biggest thing is to have them not accept things as they are, but to be like, okay, this I'm comfortable with, this I'm not comfortable with. Where is this coming from? And I understand that it's quite tiring. And sometimes they'll say to me, I'm exhausted. I just want to dance. I don't care. Okay, fine. You can do that for a while. And then as a responsible citizen and as an artist, you have a bigger role than to do 5 steps. And maybe somebody else will read your steps in that way. So I'm curious. And also there is this big responsibility in teaching at university level. There's a big responsibility in teaching children, and I wouldn't want it. But sort of to feel that, okay, this is the next generation who's going to be shaping the dance scene in Cyprus, in Europe, and anywhere else. So what tools do they need to do that? And what kind of education do they need to do that? Because what I'm finding also, what we got through this, communist educational system was a lot of drilling. It was tough. It was really, really tough schools. But I'm so good at Trivial Pursuit. I have so much information, so these kids, you'll say to them, if you said to them, where is Argentina? I don't know that they would know, which I think is so sad. I feel sad for them. I don't judge them. But I feel sad for them. But also then I do them like, just look it up. It's there. It's at your fingertips. Anything you want to know, you can learn. It's so easy. But because they've sort of gone into this way of life and the parents have changed so much. I think about my parents and I think about my parenting now. I was so independent at 14 and, my parents both worked. We both worked too, but we're still somehow always here. One of us is always here. So I was alone a lot, which I liked. Not everybody likes. But I think that also plays a big part in the way that this generation handles their lives and also how they handle their careers. So they're waiting for somebody to do it for them, or they'll say, but I put a show reel up on Instagram. Why is nobody calling me? So that this, the ambitiousness, the ambition and the drive is external. And the students that do have it, that are, either that way inclined, they tend to do well. So we see this. And I don't know that it's something that's taught or it's a part of the character or I don't know. But we're constantly in the process of having conversations, of looking at how does Cyprus fit into the global picture? Do we need to be doing sort of a Western imitation of a dance program, or does it need to be more specific? Do they need that much technique? Do they need ballet? Do they need more hip hop? Do they need more research? So we are constantly questioning ourselves. So when I teach, every year I revise my curricula. I don't teach the same class ever, partly because I get bored and partly because new things have happened. So I teach a class called Dance in Popular Culture, which is such a fun class. And, this year I felt like, well, how can I do a class in dance and popular culture without talking about Hamilton and without talking about TikTok? It would be silly. So we rearranged it. And then, so I keep introducing new ideas. Of course, popular culture is changing so much, but so is contemporary dance. There's so many exciting new things happening. There's so many not exciting new things happening that we need to talk about that. I'm finding it that there's a very interesting in Cyprus trend that the young dancers feel like they only have to do conceptual art that's leaning more towards performance art rather than dance. And I speak to them, okay, so don't you feel the need to move? Like, isn't that at the core of your dance identity? But they feel like they're not going to make it into festivals, they're not going to get funding, so they're kind of following trends rather than following what they actually want to do. And then when they get to be a little bit older, they'll get more of an identity. So this idea of identity, which we kind of talked about. We talked about my background, and so part of the educational system that we're employing is really getting the students to understand what is your identity as a person and how does that connect into your dance practice. Are we always successful? Absolutely not. And there are students who come and don't really learn anything in 4 years. They still get good grades because they complete their tasks, but they don't really change. They don't really absorb this idea of how dance intersects with identity, the identity of the island, the identity of Europe or Middle East, or then global identity. So I think that's kind of the way that education needs to change. And the way that dance also, needs to change is that we really need to start reflecting even more what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, to then really make a change through it. Because when somebody 20 years from now studies dance from 2022, what will they understand about us? And I say this to the students, and of course, then they feel enormous pressure. They're like, oh, it's too much. And, can't I just do what I feel? Sure. But then you have to reflect on it. Then you need to be able to do that. So yeah, I think that's kind of that in a nutshell. I mean, I'm talking a lot, but
no, it's fantastic to hear you. But also, I want to ask you also about the exchange, because you have so many experience, and also going to this idea of your experience in BIDE when you came to Barcelona, and also when we went to Cyprus a few years ago. What do you experience in this moment where you put these students? I remember you came with 3 of them.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I'm having the chance to be with 50 or 60 other people from all around the globe, with different ages, experience, and etc. And also when we was there, and they have similarities and sometimes distances about what is exchange and what is putting yourself in another context and interact with other experience.
Yeah, so BIDE was such a fascinating experience, and the way that we came to it was quite simply through a Google search. That's how I found you and contacted you. And then what we had done as a university is we provided scholarships to cover the fees for the students, and then they had to cover their own travel expenses. So I was trying to remember, was it 2018 that we came, or 2017? I think it was 2018, but I'm not sure. So the students came, and I think it was, so we chose probably 3 of the most open-minded students that we had. Of course, one of them, I don't remember, Panayota, she comes from a village in Cyprus, and I don't know if she'd ever left Cyprus before that. Of course, she was so keen. And I have to say that all 3 of them are doing really well. They're doing some really interesting work with choreographers, as performers, as teachers. And they just loved that experience. I mean, they found it, I think, a little bit overwhelming on the first day, and then they just had such a wonderful time. And they've made friends, which is the other thing, and they're in contact with them. For me, because I only came for a couple of days, they were there for 5, I think, and I came for 2. And I remember calling Alex and said, I have never been in a dance situation when there weren't a ton of egos. And BIDE provided that. The openness that BIDE provided was incredible. The people's willingness to just find ways to make things work was incredible to me. I had never experienced anything like that before. And I'd been to conferences and I'd been to other networking events, that there was this sense of sharing and giving that I had not experienced. So, people who are willing to just exchange stuff without getting paid, which of course I have this dilemma in my head, because I'm always willing to do things for free because I do have a salary, so I feel like I can afford to do it. But then also, why do we keep doing things for free? Why do dancers keep doing things for free? Shouldn't we be compensated for the work that we're doing? So it's a I go back and forth. I have this conflict in myself. But yeah, BIDE was an incredible experience. It was, and I met some people that I'm still in touch with, and then we were going to do an exchange with I have really bad memory issues post-COVID. The woman from Finland, then that didn't work out because of COVID and stuff. But I think that then actually Panayota ended up doing another project in Malta as a result of BIDE. So apart from, I think it's also, we have this idea that a networking thing has to lead to other things. But I think that even if it didn't, it was just such an incredible experience of people being open and not judgmental, which doesn't always happen in dance. We would like to pretend that it does, but I don't think it does. And people are looking at each other to figure out, can she dance? Can she not dance? What can they do? Are they clever? Are they not clever? I'm in touch with some of the people. Obviously, we as a university don't have funding, so we haven't been able to invite. But for next year, we're getting some funding, so hopefully we'll be able to do some master classes. And then when you came, because we felt like it was such an incredible experience, and because we couldn't get a lot of students out there, we had made B-Landing work in Cyprus, and then we had a lot more students being exposed to it. And having to be present and creative for that long is challenging, and I think it's challenging for young people now whose attention span is definitely different than ours was. But it was a really incredible experience. And then we also had the meeting with the cultural officers, and I think it was the first time that all of us came together in that way. We are still working on the Cyprus Dance Network, but then obviously everybody's been busy surviving in the last 2 years. But for me, it was also really fascinating to meet people who have the same kind of philosophy that as I do, that we just keep working until things work out, and hopefully we can make a bit of a difference, and we can just keep providing things for people, and that they're not there with an ulterior motive. So it was a really incredible experience. I really hope we can bring students out again and immerse them, and obviously being in a different town is also so important. Leaving their hometowns, although bringing you here was also wonderful because then we got to expose a lot more students to it. So let's make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. And you have a lot of things in your past, in your present, and I want to ask you, well, and I know that you have tons of projects, but what Dara is willing with the closer future, about the next season, and what is your. Please don't start another PhD.
I will not start another
one,
PhD. No.
Together when you have this struggle of I need to finish it.
Yeah. It was rough.
It's enough.
Yeah, and Alex said to me.
I wonder if you can, if you have a space, or you give up with performing on stage. But I would love to see you again as a friend, also as a colleague, dancing on the stage. But what's your, or maybe what your wishes for the future?
Yeah, so I think that my performing career has ended. I think we've been, my body has really suffered as the result of the PhD. We were joking that I had PhD injuries, but the last 6 months of the PhD,
it's a great statement.
PhD injuries, because I sat so much for the last 6 months while I was trying to finish it. It was quite brutal. And Alex was saying to me, do you remember that performance where you were teching and working on your thesis at the same time? I was like, yeah, that was pretty crazy. So it put a lot of strain on my body. And because I don't have time to keep up the practice, to keep it at a level where I can perform at a level that I'm happy with and that I'm not hurting. So, aging bodies do what they do, and that's okay. It's an interesting process. It's a sad process, and kind of not losing a part of yourself, but having to sort of redirect. So basically, I am deep in research projects. So that's kind of where my focus is. Apart from, because I'm going to be the head of the department for another 2 years, there's a lot of administrative duties, so I don't get to do a lot of other things. But I've just had writing of revisions for an article that I'd co-written with somebody. I'm working on a volume that I'm working on with a friend, where we're looking at Cypriot culture in educational systems. And then the big sort of desire and my goal is to actually go back to my PhD and publish a book. So turn that into a book. So that also means doing some field research of trying to interview some of the FOSSI female dancers. And that is kind of my 5-year plan, at which point Emily will be done with school and I will be crying every day when she goes to college. But that's a whole other story. So really my focus has turned to research. And of course, there will be smaller research projects in between. But really, I really need to go back and get myself a book contract because I think this book is very fascinating. Although there are books on FOSSI, there is nothing that really concentrates on the dancers in the work. And that's where I want to shift the attention. I want to shift the attention to, okay, there's a choreographer, and they create this work, but what is really the role of a dancer in the creative process? How do they affect? What do they do? And particularly in something that isn't necessarily understood as collaborative practice. Obviously, in contemporary, it's always collaborative, but something that's supposed to be more sort of didactic. I'm also working on another project, which is looking at dance in TV, but in non-dance settings. So I don't know if you've seen the OA. It's a Netflix show. It's a sci-fi show, and it's all organized around this choreography by Ryan Heffington. So I presented something at a conference, and then I've looked at other examples. So I'm not going to spoil it for you if you haven't seen Euphoria.
No,
but there might be. But yep, not saying anything else. So there's a lot of these examples. So those are the two big sort of research projects that I'm looking at now, and that's where my focus is. And then obviously keep looking at, what do we need to do in dance education? Reflect, how can we make dance education more relevant to young people, more relevant to the trends in dance, more sort of inclusive in both the types of dance that we're doing, the people who can have careers in dance, and I'm not talking about just performing, but many, many other forms of dance. So those are sort of my two big focus points, the research and the education. And I think, we leave the performing to people who we're making space for new people. And I think that's great. And there's a lot of young dancers in Cyprus who are really fantastic. They are moving and shaking things. There's some really interesting things happening. And I'm really looking forward to see what they do next.
Wow. Great. So thank you so much for sharing your time and also sharing your amazing experience and knowledge. And
thank you.
It's really a pleasure to hear you. And also, also you are a kind of person that you have a narrative and but also what we say in Spanish, a practice behind this. So I mean, your what we call in Spanish tu discurso match your practice. So it's a pleasure, so thank you so much to be with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's really I'm going to go back and listen to this and maybe reflect it. Maybe I need to write a memoir. Maybe that's a thing about my life experience.
Or maybe a movie. We'll see.
Maybe a movie. Okay. All right. Oh, my daughter can do that. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to you. And we love BIDE, and we hope that we can support it some more in the future. We need to make that work because it's been
We will. Well, this was the podcast number 28 with Dara, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much.